The Rebbe worked on getting rid of that victimhood, the Jewish victimhood, the Jewish, that we have to just hunker down and try to protect ourselves and make a yeshiva and not hold our heads too high. And the Rebbe was, no, we're going on the offensive, we're conquering the world. We're not, forget it's a different time, a different generation. As the Rebbe said in the first Maimer, Yud Shvat, 67 years ago, he says, we're the seventh generation, we're finishing it. What are we finishing? The job that was started by Avraham Avinu. What was Avraham Avinu's job? He went everywhere and he pronounced the name of Hashem. Al tikra vayikra el vayakri. And no, don't say vayikra. It's not. He didn't just call it out. He made everyone else call out Hashem's name. Wasn't enough that he called it and other people were listening. He made that everyone else should proclaim Hashem's name. We're finishing that job, says the Rebbe. What's very interesting is that if you look in the early years, you listen to the Sichos of the Rebbe in the early years and you think about it. We're talking about 1951, 1952. This is a few years after the Holocaust. 5 years after the Holocaust. 5 years after 6 million people were killed. 6 million of our brothers and sisters. And the Rebbe wasn't immune to this. The Rebbe had a brother who was shot by the Nazis. The Rebbe's grandmother was killed by the Nazis. The Rebbe's sister-in-law and brother-in-law were killed by the Nazis. We're talking about someone who was profoundly impacted by it. And Lubavitch was also decimated by the Nazis along with the KGB. And you barely find the Rebbe talking about it. And the Rebbe's vision was we can't live in that past. We can't live in that as victims, but we have to move on forward. There's a whole world out there which we have to go and conquer the world and bring the Shekhinah down here into this world. And we don't do that by sitting and crying about the past. The Rebbe mentioned the Holocaust several times and talked about how terrible it was, but that wasn't a focus. There was, in 1965, the Rebbe wrote a long letter to Elie Wiesel. It's printed, the letters it's written in Yiddish. Actually, after Elie Wiesel passed away last year, Ami magazine, they translated it into English and they printed it also. It's a beautiful letter, long letter. And the Rebbe says over there, we have to remember what happened. Remember, this is Elie Wiesel. His whole thing was about remembering the Holocaust. The Rebbe says we have to remember. Zacher eis asher asa lecha Amalek is a mitzvah saseh. But that's only one part. There's another part. We want to be victorious over Hitler. There's another part which is a more important part, which is making sure he doesn't succeed. Sitting back and remembering and thinking about it and krachzing and crying about it is not our ultimate victory over him. The ultimate victory is another Yid and another Yid and another Yid. What?
Another yeshiva.
Another Yid, exactly. There's a letter from the Rebbe where they wrote to the people from a certain city in Poland. They want to make this big memorial. The Rebbe wrote back to them, it's a beautiful idea, but if you listen to my suggestion, take the money and open a yeshiva. So the Rebbe said, it's a certain a forward-looking, and then the letter, the Rebbe told him to Elie Wiesel, he says, and I mean this to you, you have to get married. Elie Wiesel still wasn't married at the time. He got married in 1969, he got married 4 years later. He says, you have to go, your victory is when you're going to get married, and you're going to have a kid. And the Rebbe said, and there will be another Vision Tzar Chassid here in this world, because Elie Wiesel was a Vision Tzar Chassid. And the Rebbe said, then the Rebbe says, I don't mean Dafka Vizhnitzer. I don't care if he's a Vizhnitzer, if he's a Lubavitcher, or any Yid who's a Shemer Torah mitzvahs. But the main thing is that's the ultimate victory. And Elie Wiesel later related in an interview that when he got married, the biggest bouquet of flowers that he received was from the Rebbe. The Rebbe sent him when he got married. There was a person who wrote to the Rebbe, and he made a Haggadah. It's also a letter from the Rebbe printed. And in the Haggadah somewhere, it's not clear where, but he put in a zecher to the Holocaust, like in the Haggadah somewhere, to say some stuff about the Holocaust. The Rebbe wrote him back, and the Rebbe said, it's not the right place. Pesach by night, we're celebrating our freedom. There's a time and a place to talk about the Holocaust. It's not Pesach when we're sitting by the Seder. And the Rebbe asked him that if he reprints the Haggadah, to take out that passage. And it's not that the Rebbe was insensitive to the suffering of the Yidden, but it's a certain understanding, that when you go to a Yid today and what they identify is the Holocaust, that's what they identify Yiddishkeit with, that's a victimhood Yid, that's a victimhood Yiddishkeit. We're not victims, we're survivors, we survived the Holocaust, we're not victims, and we have a role, we have a mission here in this world. We are Oir la'amim, we are the light to the nations, and we don't do that by being victims. We don't do that by sitting in our place, but rather going on the offensive. And we have the power, we have the strength, we have the ability to go into to impact the entire world.